We have time for a few questions, about 5 minutes for a few questions to either Ewa or David, perhaps concerning the reports. And probably one of the most interesting points that Ewa made was that there are so many reports, we've been talking, so what are we going to do now? Let's maybe start talking about what to do and do it.
My name is Anna Olsson. I come from the Institute for Research and Innovation in Health in Portugal. I wanted to reflect a little bit on the question of talking with the public or talking to the public. I'm sure that this is going to come up later in the meeting, but I just wanted to reflect on the fact that we have, within the context of science in society, the concept has been moving from public understanding of science to science in society to, as my colleague who works with this, I'm not an expert, but I'd like to draw the attention, who talks about science with and for society. And the concept of responsible research and innovation is, in fact, the center of that idea is that we should develop science in a dialogue with the public. And I think this particular context of gene editing is super interesting for this dialogue with the public, because unlike the genetic modifications that were introduced a decade or more ago, where the public saw risks and would not see an obvious advantage, here it would be it seems to me much more obvious that people in general will see an advantage in addressing biomedical issues. And I think this is an excellent opportunity to actually try to establish a dialogue which is not top-down and not talking to the public, but talking with them and listening to them as well. Them, assuming which is already a stupid use of the term because we are all part of the public. Thank you.
I fully approve. I mean, there's nothing else to say. But I would like to say one thing. I remember the time of introducing something before GMOs, that is genetic engineering, when bacteria provided us with the previous source of wonder and questions. And in a strange way, Europe was silent. There was a lot going on in the States. I was a postdoc there then, and there were meetings and so on. And people were just as afraid of that as they are now, and they're saying that nothing. I have a slide which I show my students saying that nothing good will come of this. We don't need new drugs, we don't need new food. I mean, sort of very, very conservative. I think the society now is less conservative, fortunately, and probably more likely that we can talk to them.
Alexis Greenbaum, CA France. Thank you for emphasizing the very important point about communicating uncertainty. How do we talk to the public about uncertainty and the limits of knowledge? In this respect, one topic that has played a big role in the GMO debate, for example, is the precautionary principle, governance of uncertainty. I haven't yet seen much of this precautionary debate on gene editing in general. Do you see this coming, or do you feel that we will not have that subject here?
I'm not sure if one of the papers I referenced, at least one thing I looked at recently was on the precautionary principle by two authors. I will add it into it. But that was essentially the only one I saw, and it was a sort of outlier. So I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure that I really like the precautionary principle for genetically modified organisms. So perhaps this is why, but at least once it was mentioned in a serious paper that I have seen.
If I can add something, in our position paper, the one in transgenic, the European one, we clearly mention, because more or less what Francisco presented, the question of off-target, the question of on-target, the question of the controlling the mechanism of repair, the question of the unknown on the long term, whether it is mosaicism or the stability of the construct. All these are referring to the technical aspect of the precautionary principle, but that will need to be assessed. And clearly one thing at stake in this field, as in others, is to move from the classical benefit balance risk, because we don't know the benefits, the real ones, we don't know the real risk, to a continuous assessment. And this continuous assessment will need a debate and a dialogue to understand what is the proportionality, to know what kind of risk we are ready to take for what kind of benefits we expect, and a permanent assessment that could be open to allow the public to see that the research is ongoing, but the assessment is also ongoing. So it's a matter of confidence in the process, and among the things, openness and the open science, open debate will be seminal to this confidence.
Emma Woods from the Royal Society, which is the UK's National Academy of Sciences. I've actually got a comment rather than a question. I wanted to pick up on this issue of public dialogue and actually to add to the list of reports and initiatives that we've already heard about. A week before last, the Royal Society published the results of a UK-wide public dialogue looking at applications of genetic technologies in people, plants and animals. And this was done through a survey of about 2,000 people in the UK, and also through very detailed focus groups where people were able to come together over a period of a few weeks to reflect on what they had heard and to talk to experts in a kind of neutral and safe environment. The headline finding really was that when people talked generally about the use of these technologies, they were cautiously optimistic. When they talked about the uses of the technologies for very specific uses for very specific purposes, actually views became much more nuanced and ultimately became a bit more positive, particularly around human applications. So I won't say any more except to say I'm very happy to talk more about the methods we used and the results in any of the breaks.